kind of long story short, I in the last part of the time I was at Rhythm and Hughes.
Yeah.
When I'd be on the phone talking to people and clients and this and that and the other thing, I had all these Post-it pads, and so I started drawing hot rods. And just on the little square and the little rectangular, those, they're like 3 by 5 and 3 by 3 or whatever they are. And, and every time I was on the phone, I'd draw a little thing. It'd take me about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. And what was happening is that when I was a kid, because one of your questions was, where do you start? When I was a kid, the things that I liked, being, I was born in 1951, right after World War II.
Yeah.
My dad, it's funny because I listened to, I didn't get all the way through Russell's interview, but he was saying that his dad was trained to be a door gunner on a B-17.
Yeah, the ball turret gunner. Yeah.
Ball turret gunner. Well, my dad worked at Boeing in Seattle building B-17s.
Wow.
And my dad was a draftsman and a fabricator. And I have one of the drawings that he did as a draftsman for a B-17, the part that he worked on. And it's just one of those things that it kind of tells me why I do what I do and why I do it in some ways. And so when I heard Russell in that interview say that, I go, God, this is, talk about, close proximity and just the different things that we all have in common.
Yeah.
But but when I was a kid, I just fell in love with hot rods. Big Daddy Roth.
Yeah.
Big Daddy Roth is my hero to this day. He might be the most influential, outside of my dad, Big Daddy Roth might be my biggest influence. Okay. And like I said, I grew up in a town that was full of logging trucks and machinery and lumber mills. My dad worked at a lumber mill, and I was just around all this stuff. And so I was always fascinated by machinery. And my dad kind of got he instilled me with his love of airplanes.
Oh, okay. Because he worked on them.
My dad would have, had the situation been different, he would have gone on and worked in aeronautics all his life. That isn't the way his life turned out. But because he was a skilled draftsman, he could show me how to get my ellipses right on my wheels. So when I was about 11, 12, and 13 years old, I was trying to draw hot rods, and all the wheels just looked like they were pretzels. And but he showed me how to correct them and all that kind of stuff. And so my earliest influences outside of war comics, because I loved war comics, I loved Joe Kubert, I loved Sergeant Rock, Our Army at War, The Haunted Tank. I loved all that stuff. I loved Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
That's another thing. We could talk about Mad Magazine just like we could talk about Heavy Metal Magazine.
There's
so much good stuff in Mad Magazine.
Yeah, the art. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jack Davis.
Absolutely. I mean, Mort Drucker.
Yeah.
Jack Davis. I show Jack Davis to my kids today. I think Jack Davis is maybe my favorite artist of all time.
Yeah, he's such a great draftsman, and also, his characterizations of people is so right on the money.
And all crosshatched.
Yeah.
Crosshatched. Yeah, I remember being, when I was a kid, they did paperbacks that were of Mad Magazine stuff. So they took Mad magazine format and shrunk it down to paperback size, and I had one called Son of Mad, and I was looking at it, and even as like a 10-year-old or 11 or whatever it was, I couldn't understand, because I knew nothing about reproduction. I couldn't figure out how anybody could draw that small.
Oh yeah.
Who could draw that small with that much detail and that much finesse? And it was a mystery, because I didn't know about photo reduction. It was just like, wow, look at these drawings. And I was mesmerized. I was literally hypnotized by the beauty of that kind of drawing. And but anyhow, so then Big Daddy Roth comes along, and he completely redefines for me what a car can look like. A car can look like a spaceship. It can look like, and it's funny. And then those monster shirts came out, and I was just, this is like, it's almost like having a drug habit or something. I just became obsessed with monster shirts and dragsters and hot rods and everything. And so I drew them up until the time that I was about 14 years old, and then I stopped. And I didn't draw them again until I started drawing them again at Rhythm and Hues 20 years later.
Yeah.
What the little lightning bolt that hit me in the middle of my forehead was, after I kept doing it, and they kept getting better, and I was really having fun at them. And then finally, I had like 100 of them. Wow! And I put them in a little notebook. I go, God, what the hell's wrong with me? I'm drawing hot rods all the time.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, Ed, I had this little, the light bulb that grows right out of the top of your skull.
Yeah.
And then somebody pulls the cord, the light comes on. I thought, now this is 10 years ago, so I'm still in my 50s.
Yep.
And the light bulb goes on and it says, you know, Dan, you can go back now and draw hot rods the way that you wished that you could have drawn them when you were 12 years old. Because now you're a pro.
That's
now
right.
You're a pro. You're in the big leagues. You know how to do what you want to do. You know how to get the result. You know how to make the drawing speak to you in the way that it spoke to you back then, but you never could get it quite right. Now you can make the omelet the way you want to make it. And and so that's what put me on the path to doing my book. And this is where the coming around to what our original point was, is that at 70 years old, my feeling is 70 is the new 12.
Wow. How about that?
And I believe this. I believe this is where, I tell all our peers, all the people we know and stuff, when we're talking about art and stuff, I fucking hate the business, and the business, blah, 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 blah. Everybody's old, whatever. I say, forget about it. Be 12.
Be 12, yeah.
Go to the place where drawing gave you the most joy, and do that.
Yeah.
Because you and I and everybody we know, our enthusiasm brought us to this business. And the business has its ups and downs, and certainly the best part of the business is all the people that we know.
Yeah.
We know, this is, I never, ever realized that there were so many people that were sort of like my cousins. We're all cousins, man. This is what blows my mind, is that we all have these sort of similar or origin stories.
Yeah.
We grew up liking, a certain comic book or a certain design, and we saw a film that changed our life. We liked Creepy magazine. We we saw Bernie Wrightson, and it changed our life. We saw heavy metal. We saw Pinocchio, and whatever it was, because there's an awful lot of us. There's an awful lot of us that do what we do, but we have these similar stories, and what it means is we spend an awful lot of time alone in our room drawing things that it's like learning to play the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan didn't become Stevie Ray Vaughan by laying on his bed and looking at the ceiling and thinking about it. Jeff Beck didn't become Jeff Beck because he willed his way. It's just practice, and so doing this book, and then I did a book. It took me 5 years to do the book, and I realized that's what I came away with is like, forget all this. Find your inner 12-year-old, and that where nobody could tell you what to do. Do those things that you've always wanted to do. Don't wait.
That's so important.
Don't wait, because we will. We've worked in animation, we've worked in film, we've worked in visual effects, and I've had some wonderful experiences, and the experiences were mostly because, and certainly we've all had some projects that were really, really wonderful, and they turned out great. The directors, the producers, the business people, whatever, they turned out great, but that's only about 20%, at least in my case. And when you finally just decide, you get to a point where you can do your work, and I say go back and remember what it was like to be when you were 12.
Yeah,
because that's where you could put anything on paper or paint or whatever. And it didn't matter if it was wrong, because it wasn't wrong. It was just where you were at the moment. And so that's and again, just sitting where I'm sitting, I have this sense of gratitude that somehow I got to go along on this ride with all of you. Our friends at Deke, our friends at Rhythm and Hues. I worked at Sony and Cartoon Network and all this, and all these people that are so visually sophisticated, and I can't do 10% of what they can do, but I've never cared that I can't. The only thing that matters is just what you're doing every day, is being creative and having ideas. So that's where the fun of teaching comes in, because now I look at what all these, my students are all about. I got 60 students, and they're all in their 20. Some of them are right out of high school, so anywhere between say 19 and 24 and whatever.
Yeah.
And you and I, we've done this so long. We're like old baseball coaches. You can look at their work, and you can kind of tell their future.
Oh, wow!
And some of them, you see people that are really raw, but they're really dedicated. And they're not necessarily going to work in film. But they could certainly do graphic novels that'll blow your mind. So knowing what we know, you try to find out where they want to go, what they enjoy, and then you try to help them shape their skill set so they can find their path. That's fun. That's fun because you can, we sort of take for granted the amount of experience that we have, and that's a valuable thing. And being a child of the '60s,
yep.
I'm my sort of the hippie part of my brain. I just want to give it all away, and I can't give it away fast enough.
Fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what you know. Think about what you know. Mm-hmm. We're like bank vaults that are full of information.
Yeah.
And certainly, there's all this technology and all these tools and all these things and whatever, da 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 da. But unless you tell them about Bernie Wrightson and Frazetta and Mobius and Jack Davis and Wally Wood, who's going to tell them?
Yeah.
Who's going to tell them about Alex Toth and who's there's one of the
Will Eisner?
Yeah, then Will Eisner. I mean, Will Eisner. My goodness, what a
Milton Caniff.
Milton Caniff. Come on, these are See, nice. You see where we're going here?
Yeah.
This is like this time passes so quickly.
Yeah, sure does.
And the storytellers and the craft and the joy, the love, the drawings, the humor, the pathos, the awesomeness of these creative skills is so. If I was, there's so many ways to go with this, but I just think a creative education and an art education is, because you can teach anything through art. You can teach math, you can teach, science, you can teach storytelling and all of this. And plus, it's being able to create stuff is its own reward.
Yeah.
Being
a creator, yeah.
I don't know. It's boy, I've been rambling here.
Yeah, you won't let me talk. But I'm
sorry. Yeah, I'm just going to shut up now. I'm like a tape loop that doesn't know where to go.
No, you were always a gentleman, from what I can remember, and you always had some reservation, but you were very observant and very keen. And I'm surprised that you're still very energetic and you're feisty. You got that fight in you. I could tell. And you were the elder gentleman, and you were like kind of like that stability. While we were all like crazy with some bit of lunacy, but yeah, you were there. You were like the center of our spoke, kind of thing.
When we were in Sherman Oaks,
yeah.
When Steve Olds came, he was in the middle of the room. And it was me and Marcelo,
yep,
and Richie and Paul. We were all in this little. We literally had to scooch our chairs in for a person to walk behind us.
Oh man,
it was crowded. And of course, Steve was very buttoned down and very serious and stuff. But of course, they were sticking pencils in the ceiling. They were having rubber band fights and stuff. And it was like, and I'll tell you. Well, do you want me to tell you a Deke story?
Oh, please, yeah.
Because when I went to Deke, I thought my career was over.
Ah.
I thought I was at the end of the line, where the train backs up and it disconnects the caboose, and then the train pulls away.
Oh, jeez.
And the caboose is out in the middle of the desert, and you're in it. That's what I thought, because I had no knowledge of or respect for Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Because it was that era, and I was never, when I think of classic animation, I just think of all of that beautiful production art from Disney and everybody else. And Saturday, and I love the Flintstones and the Jetsons and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But boy, that era of, and not to be, not to be disrespectful to anything that anybody likes, but I wasn't a fan of a lot of those shows that were on, and the production values were really bad. And it wasn't until I worked at Deke I realized the pressure that everybody was under to produce that much work that for a price, whatever. I went there, and the big revelation that I had once I got there, because do you remember Mark Bookwald?
Yeah.
Oh my God, and Richie and Steve Swaja and it was a revelation to me, because I realized that the work that was being done in the studio on everybody's desks was really beautiful. And they were cranking it out really fast.
Yeah.
So, because I came from the world of illustration, and I'd worked at Rolling Stone magazine, working for Rolling Stone, and I was doing a lot of advertising and a lot of illustration type stuff. And I would take a week to do, a piece. I'd get $150 for it, but I'd spend, 55 hours and get $150, right?
Yeah.
And so then I go to Deke, and I'm working on I forget, we did an outer space movie. Then we worked on Alf Tales. By the time I left, I could do 2 backgrounds a day.
Yeah. Wow.
And I gained such respect for everybody that you and I were working with. It was a revelation that, wow, these guys are pros. And they take a model, they take a character pack, a model pack, a storyboard, and boom, and you're cranking between the rubber band fights, right?
Yeah.
And so that actually prepared me to jump, because I was at Deke a little bit more than a year and a half, and then I went to Rhythm and Hughes, and but. I considered working at Deke my second education. I got my first education at Art Center, but I got my second education at Deke. And I tell my students this, it was the job that I absolutely dreaded taking. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do it. But our son had just been born. I needed stability, and so I took the job, and it turned out to be one of the best things I ever did.
Yeah.
But the day before I took the job, I thought my career had ended.
Oh, yeah, caboose. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, my God, it's over. Wow, that was short. And I'm still friends with all these people.
Yeah. It was one of the studios. I mean, I heard about it in New York through Alex Stevens, and Alex Stevens brought out Ray Shaughnessy and this other guy. Yeah, this other guy, Joe, went out there, and I think one of them came back, or both of them came back, because it's kind of like a seasonal thing. And they told me all about it, and I wanted to go. So I contacted Alex Stevens, and they got me out there, and started working. I was supposed to be on Cops, but they put me on Elf and Elf Tales for some reason. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, like you said, it was like one of those centers where you go if you want to work on cool animation. There weren't many around at the time that could do the sort of style that Deke did, from almost nearly comic book stuff to quirky to cute. They were doing all those things, and they were cool. They weren't like Hanna-Barbera stuff. They were just a little bit of cutting edge, a little bit on the edge. And I too am glad that I was out there and met all those great artists and artisans. Terrific people.
And again, in one of those twists of fate, Steve Swaja, he was over in the corner, and I was the second oldest, I think. I was 36, and I think Steve might have been 50.
at the time, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And hey Swash, hey Swash, hey Swash, and it finally occurred to me one day that his last name was Swaja.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this in my book because I gave him a 2-page spread in my book.
Wow.
That I knew who Steve Swaja was when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
Because he was in all the hot rod magazines that I bought.
Wow. Cool.
Because he designed dragsters.
Wow.
He did, and those impeccable drawings that he did for G.I. Joe, mm-hmm. and all those, because he would do all those model breakdowns that were just perfect. Mm-hmm. And I knew, and I said, excuse me, are you Steve Swaja? And he goes, yeah. He's kind of crusty. He goes, yeah. I go, well, you designed the 22 Junior for Tony Nancy. He goes, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, man, I've admired your work since I was 12 years old because you were in all the hot rod magazines. Mm-hmm. And right in that moment, we just became best friends.
Awesome story.
We used to go to the drag races together, and took me to Tony Nancy was a dragster builder and driver. We went over to his shop one day. Wow. And Swash was a crusty guy and whatever, and he never wanted to talk about his contributions to the original Batmobile, but yeah, I did that. He kind of, he didn't, because it wasn't. He did it, because he kind of did a makeover. He didn't actually design the whole thing. But when you look at his, what he did for drag racing and hot rodding, that guy, and so I'm thinking, well, crap, here I am in Hollywood, and I'm meeting literally one of my childhood heroes.
Yeah.
And he's just in the corner doing his breakdown drawings for G.I. Joe and stuff. Welcome to Hollywood, young man. And Marcelo and Paul, although I didn't know them at Otis, they knew me, and they ended up doing storyboard cleanup on Alf. Mm-hmm. And I try to tell my kids, my young adults, my young designers, I try to tell them, I know guys that started out doing storyboard cleanups. That are now production designers in Hollywood. Yeah. You know who the biggest success story is Paul Felix.
Yeah, he kind of came a little bit later and did the storyboard cleanups, and working really late, and until his like contact lens dried out. His eyes were like bloody red. Remember that? And now he's like on other animated features.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So this is this is when I'm, and certainly this kind of the stuff that we're talking about are the way that our I don't know exactly how to put it, but our
take your time.
Our younger aspirations, those things. And see, I guess I said it earlier, I'm still a fan.
Yeah.
So I see stuff and I'm like, damn.
I'm going to get that or something. Yeah.
And it's not like I'm intimidated by it because it isn't necessarily something that I want to do, but my reverence for the craft and the art and just the commitment that people do, it's mind-boggling to me. And I go, man, I'm somewhere in this herd, I know what it is that I like to do. I know what I get satisfaction out of. I know the things that what's so weird is in this field that we do, I've never felt any sense of competition. I never feel like I'm competing with anybody. I just feel like, God, look at these people that do what we do, and everybody's an individual, and everybody has their own recipe. It's like being in it's like a stadium full of 5-star chefs or something.
Yeah.
We have, certainly at Otis, about 60, I'm going to say 55 to 60% of our student body is Pacific Rim.
Mm-hmm.
And that is majority of South Korea, certainly China, a little bit of Vietnam, Malaysia, and of course the majority of the Asian population is Los Angeles, South Korean population in Los Angeles. So there's really a vibrant, and the kids here, I got to tell you, they're really fun to work with. There was a couple years, well, not a couple years ago, but a little more than a year ago, when BTS, they played the Rose twice, and I mentioned to one of the because my wife, Sarah, and my wife and I, we'll watch BTS videos, man. Those guys are, they're good. And whether they're Guns N' Roses or not, that's another. But those guys are pros, and what they do is so dynamic that it's. But anyhow, I mentioned to one of my students. I said, "Hey, did you see the new?" I said, "Hey, are you going to go see BTS at the Rose Bowl?" And their eyes just lit up. Oh, like I had, Do you know who BTS is? I go, well, yeah. I said I don't know a lot about them, but I like what I see. And I swear to God, it was like I built a bridge. I had now because they have created such a positive connection in America that for Korean American culture, that it's just this dynamic moment. And but I was like, wow! Now I could talk to this student because they realized we had something that was just a little bit in common,
Yeah. I think that's important for the Korean students.
Yes, it absolutely is. I was thinking because, you and Steve Olds both have. I'm a big fan of the brushed line, the thick and thin line. And there's certain. I've always been a huge Joe. I've always loved Joe Kubert's brushwork. There's just something. There's nobody that can draw a 5 o'clock shadow like Joe Kubert, or the shadow of a helmet across the eyes, right?
Yeah.
And there's just certain things that, and I don't even know why I even noticed those things when I was a kid, but they were. But even as a kid, you knew who you liked, and you knew who we developed our taste in all those early years. And Victor Moscoso, who is one of my favorite psychedelic artists, he has a brush line that goes from just like razor thin to, stuff. But I always remember you and Steve Olds, back in the day when we were using pens and brushes and things, you and Steve Olds had that ability to control a line that was kind of pure. It was sort of like and because I can only think of things in musical terms, is that the line was always it was kind of like a musical note. That when you hear an isolated note and it starts out and you can barely hear it and then it expands, and I don't know if that's pressure on the string or stretching the string or whatever, but the note widens and then it goes down. But I always thought of you and Steve as having, you two are two of the guys that I thought, man, that's a pretty sweet line that these guys have. Are you still doing pen and ink, or do you do everything digitally these days?
Yeah, I would because I kind of cover the analog part. I mean, we came from the analog, pen and pencil. But I think, just to tribute, I think the lines that I got in later years came from Joe Johnston and Sid Mead. They were would look at their I would look at their lines constantly, and I would try to use a felt tip pen, a pilot felt tip pen, to get that kind of the width and the contact, the touch. And I'm pretty sure Steve got the same thing from Sid Mead as well. So we both came from the Sid Mead school of the line width. I think, well, for me, that was Sid Mead was my inspiration for the line, the felt tip line. And
but you always, your line always had pressure in it.
Oh,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember all those things you did for Eggs of Steel. You did a whole series of really cute little just ink drawings with marker and whatever and stuff. And there was always just that line quality from again, line that started really wispy and then kind of got just a little bit bolder, and then you could just feel the pressure coming out of the line, where it was like it's like a good tennis swing, a really good tennis swing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
It's funny that you mentioned Joe Johnston, because I believe that Joe Johnston is one of the unsung heroes of the modern visual development, especially for visual effects and hardware films.
Mm.
Because did you ever see that sketchbook he did? The Joe Johnston Star Wars sketchbook?
Yeah, the blue book, sort of horizontal format. Yeah.
I think, and I will state this right now. I think that is the book that launched the modern era of design for effects films.
Mm. Absolutely, I agree. And while we vouched for that, I mean, we acknowledge that, and we would always refer to it, something that as a inspiration that inspired us.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, between you and me and Steve Olds, we probably drawn 10,000 spaceship interiors.
10,000, and cafes, coffee shops, diners.
both directions. The counter with they always got to have 15 stools. Why can't they just have 3?
And little glass container with straws. We got salt, pepper.
See, this is the. Oh God! Now
did I start something?
Now I am feeling some pain.
I remember your drawing was like for Elf, and I kind of snuck up behind you and kind of looked, and you had this drawing, and you always drew like small, on like 8.5 by 14, that kind of format. Never 8.5 by 11.
Yeah.
And it was all like horizontal, maybe for a pan shot or something like that. But you always had this. I think I remember one of a diner with the stools and counter, and the napkin holder and the salt shake and pepper shake.
All of it.
Forks.
Well, this.
Yeah.
And this is this is the thing, and this is the crucible of fire that this is why we are brothers of a certain kind, because we've done so much of that, and it's draw the diner, then draw the reverse, and then draw the props, and then draw the booth, and then draw the reverse of the booth, draw the fan, draw the, all that stuff. And pretty soon you become visually sophisticated. And the work, and this is the thing that I tell my students, you don't even have to be good. You just have to do the work. And then you have to do some more work, and then you have to do some more work and some more work. And the reason that you and I get to have this conversation, and our dear friend Steve Olds and all these people, Marcello and Paul Wee, is that we just do the work, and then we do more, and then we do more until finally, whatever it is that's in our heads that won't allow us to quit.
Yeah.
That's why I get to sit here, at my age and feel gratitude, because I tell my kids, I go, when I started, the only thing, I knew I wanted to work for Rolling Stone magazine. That's the only thing I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of the counterculture. I wanted to work for Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Because that was rock and roll and politics, and that was my generation. And whatever they had, I just wanted to be part of it. I couldn't play guitar. I couldn't be in a band. I mean, I could, but I was just too terrified of standing in front of people and talking or playing an instrument. I just didn't have the confidence to do it. So I wanted to be part of the counterculture, and so Rolling Stone was my goal. And I got to work for Rolling Stone. I did a bunch of stuff for them. My first job was for Rolling Stone. And I told my students, so when I went to Art Center, I said, I was basically, the only qualities that I have is that I was naive and stubborn.
Oh.
And naive, I didn't know any better, because I didn't know anything. I knew what I liked, but I didn't know anything about film or storyboarding or anything. I knew Frank Lloyd Wright and Norman Rockwell. Okay, and that was it. But the other thing that I knew about myself is that I've never been afraid of just working till I can't work anymore. And I think you probably have that quality, and I think Stephen Olds does, and the people that we know, we're not just sitting in our room alone for 15 hours and listening to our favorite music, and just the people that really want to do this from everybody else. And some of the people, and I'm sure you see this in your students too. There are students that they're not your best students, but they listen to every word that you say. They ask questions. They come back, they show you their latest thing, they ask for feedback, and then they go and actually do the feedback, and they come back again.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite people.
Yeah, I agree.
They're my favorite people, and I will always invest in a student that won't give up, because I won't give up on somebody that won't give up, because I get really talented people that are so good that they can kind of whip something out, but they're actually not really interested in what you're saying. and that happens all the time too. So that's kind of that's one of the aspects of teaching that makes it really an interesting thing.
Sure. You and I can probably go on and about this kind of things, but that's there's one thing that I'm really, really interested in and curious about is your association with Robert Abel and Associates. Now,
Sure.
You and Clark and some of the members came from Rhythm Use, all came from there. What were your contribution there after Rolling Stones? How did you start at Robert Abel and Associates?
Well, that's a really good question, Ed, and it was one of the, and in some ways it's all about music and the counterculture and hippie culture and all of that, because when I graduated from school, I took a year off, and my portfolio just looked like it was done by 9 different people. And so I just sat down and I got some odd jobs and I just worked on my portfolio. And my single goal was I wanted to work for Rolling Stone. That's it. And I went I have a couple buddies that I grew up with, and this is 1975. We took a trip across the United States, 4 of us in a van, and like the Ninja Turtles. And when I got back, I went to Rolling Stone, and I finally got this appointment. And the art director says, "Okay, this is black and white. This is what I need." He goes, he said, "You want to do a job?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I mean, right now." And I go, "Right now?" And he goes, "Yeah, like I want you to do it right now, like now." I go, oh, okay. And so he gave me 3 spot illustrations.
Whoa.
And I sat, and he cleared off a desk in somebody's office, and I sat there, and I did 2 illustrations in about 6 hours.
Wow.
And my cousins lived up there, so I stayed with my cousins. I came back the next day and did the 3rd one. So my first job was for Rolling Stone.
Wow. Awesome.
Because I was able to do it, I ended up doing about 15 jobs for Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
And the thing that Rolling Stone did for me is that, about 300,000 people were looking at Rolling Stone.
Yep.
And so as I did more and more pieces, it helped me establish an identity. And I kind of got my wish on my first wish. I got to work for Rolling Stone. And so being a part of, for me at, 24 years old, to be part of the counterculture working for this rock and roll magazine, I was in hog heaven.
Yeah, yeah.
And so at the same time in Los Angeles, I saw this poster for Robert Abel, 1975. It said Robert Abel and Associates, See Our Light. And they did a logo that had the 75 for 1975, and then it had this, and it looked like it was airbrushed, and it was glowing. But when you looked at it, I go, this isn't airbrushed. This is something else. Hell, it was just different enough. It's like somebody had re-recorded a song, and you knew it wasn't the original. And so I began to learn about them, and I went by to see them, and I got a job. And now you know Richard Taylor, right?
Yeah.
Well, Richard Taylor, he knew my work from Rolling Stone.
Oh.
So that is how and also, I can't think of his name now. And that was kind of my calling card. Because they had seen my work in Rolling Stone, I was at least, there was something familiar about, oh, I saw that thing in Rolling Stone. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. What are you doing? Oh, do you want to do this? Blah, blah, blah. Anyhow. So I worked at, and so this is 1979, and I worked at Robert Abel. Now they were using that process that was called Candy Apple, and it was they had a process where they would create positives and negatives of an image, and then put a piece of I forget what they called it. It was like a piece of plexiglass between the two, and then they would blow light from behind and take a picture of it. And so that is how they got that airbrush glow.
Okay.
So I don't know if have you ever seen those 7-Up commercials and those things that they did? They look, to today's sophisticated eye, because now computer graphics and imagery is so sophisticated, that they look like they were made 100 years ago. But in their day, they were state of the art, and nobody knew how they did it or how they looked like that.
Yeah.
Now, they look very dated to today's eye, but here's the deal, and this is the thing that my visual education, after Joe Kubert and Sergeant Rock, after
I love it.
After Big Daddy Rock, after the Monster Shirts, after the Hot Rods, in 1966, hot rod culture began to fade. And before 1964-65, hot rod culture was what all of us little guys did. Is we put model kits together, we built models, we spray paint and glue and all this, hot rods and airplanes and all this. And then in 1964, this little band showed up called the Beatles. And when they showed up, every kid that was gluing models together just picked up a guitar and wanted to be in a rock and roll band.
Wow.
So culture changed.
Yeah.
And by Beatles came out in February of '64 on the Ed Sullivan Show. By '65, '66, that was fading. And Roth, Big Daddy Roth, wasn't doing as cool cars as he used to do. He was doing motorcycles and stuff. And so right as car culture and hot rod culture was subsiding, hippie culture, the counterculture, was rising.
Yeah.
And right there about 1966, when the Beatles did Rubber Soul, that psychedelic hippie culture was on the rise, and that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And so it was literally, I stepped off of one wave and got onto another one, because I was absolutely mesmerized by hippie culture.
Wow! So
and
you embraced it. You didn't run away the other way, but you...
oh, absolutely. No, I was. I can honestly say today it's one of the most sort of formative educational experiences that I had. And I don't mean, I never took any drugs or anything, but I was so taken by, because it just emerged all at once. And the posters, the music, the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Airplane, Country Joe and the Fish, Quicksilver Messenger Service, Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company, these bands, they just appeared. It was like a ship landed, and it all happened instantly. And the graphics were the thing that blew my mind. And and to this day, I don't know how familiar you are with that time period, but there was 5 artists. They're called the Big Five.
Yeah.
Rick Griffin, Victor Moscoso, Alton Kelly, Stanley Mouse, and Wes Wilson. And they were the Big Five poster artists. And I got subscriptions to and they drew the posters for the Avalon Ballroom and the Fillmore Auditorium.
Yeah.
When people today at Coachella and Lollapalooza and all of these places, the eclectic nature of those concerts began in 1965 at the Avalon Ballroom and the Fillmore Auditorium.
God, how about that?
And they were, and the reason I say that is that before that time, because, I've been to shows that, I saw Led Zeppelin with Rahsaan Roland Kirk, who was a blind jazz man that played 3 saxophones, 3 saxophones simultaneously. He opened for Led Zeppelin. That's the kind of show. I saw Junior Walker and the All-Stars open for the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
Santana and Humble Pie. Those kinds of shows, and the eclectic nature of those kinds of shows, plus the moment, Monterey Pop, Woodstock, Altamont, all those that was my youth.
Mm-hmm.
Not unlike what's happening today in America with this tumultuous time that we're having right now. I could, you and I could speak about this for hours about the similarities with the 60s and all that. But when I went to the Avalon Ballroom and the Fillmore, they had these light shows. And the light shows were, again, by today's standards, if you've ever seen any of the stuff from, a U2 concert or BTS or, Roger Waters' The Wall,
mm-hmm.
the level of imagery that we are capable of creating for shows and raves and all of this stuff it's unimaginable. We literally live in the electric dream. And everything. So I was 16 years old when I saw Janis Joplin at the Avalon Ballroom.
Yeah.
And the entire room was just alive with imagery, and they were liquid projections and then little cartoons showing. And it made such an impression on me as a non-narrative expression of, I won't even call it storytelling. I would just call it a non-narrative image association. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the thing that, even as an old man, I hold on to that curiosity about the way that you and me and the people that we know, how do we create and process the imagery? How do we do what we do? What part of that is inspiration? What part of that is technique? What part of that is the dream state? What part of that is our subconscious that we try to feebly recreate when we put a pen in our hand? So those are the things that interest me. So anyhow, I took that stuff to heart. For me, a rock concert has never been some big stupid thing where you get all screwed up and then I paid attention.
Yeah.
Now, and I've probably seen since 1966. I've probably seen about 400 shows. Different people. I haven't seen everybody I wanted to see. I've seen some amazing stuff, and it's always been the subconscious source material that I've always been so curious about. And so that's what I tried to bring to Rolling Stone. And so then when I went to Robert Abel and Associates, and Richard Taylor was there, he goes, "Hey, you're that guy that did that stuff in Rolling Stone. Oh, hi, how are you?" Da, 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 da. And Richard Taylor, it turns out that Richard Taylor used to do light shows for the Grateful Dead.
Oh, man.
So he traveled with the Grateful Dead for years. So he and I hit it off immediately. Mm-hmm. And we're still friends today.
Yeah.
I talked to him, 3 weeks ago.
Ah.
But he was, and so here I am, having worked at Rolling Stone and done all this stuff. I walk into this company, and Robert Abel and Associates, for me, was the rock and roll band that I could finally be a part of.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I've always thought of myself in these situations, whether it was Deke or Rhythm and Hughes or Robert Abel or Cartoon Network or whatever. I just think of myself as a musician that happens to I do this one thing. I don't do it better or worse than anybody else. I just do what I do, and I try to find a place where I can play the instrument that I play. And so Robert Abel, to me, was this crazy-ass kind of dream job because it was all new.
Yep.
It was all new. Nobody knew what. And here's the thing, people like Con Pedersen. Con Pedersen was the guy that did the final slit scan stuff on 2001. Richard Taylor had worked with Dead. Robert Abel had just finished that Elvis film, Taking Care of Business, or whatever the hell it was. And so the people, so this group of people that you and I are, in league with, are artists and mathematicians, people that can build camera systems, people that can draw, people that can visualize. And so Robert Abel, I was only there for a year and a half in the first segment. And then we were going to do the first Star Trek movie, and that, for business reasons, that kind of all came unraveled. I went back to doing my illustration stuff and whatever, and and then I came back in 1984, and I did a couple commercials with Randy Roberts. Randy Roberts. And if you can break free of that, and you still have your energy and your enthusiasm, then that's, like I said, 70's the new 12. And be aware that's what's in your head is really valuable, and there isn't anything else on this planet that's like what you got in your own inspirational flat file, Yeah. And so I'm trying to. I don't draw as much as I draw for my students, and I do a lot of layout, and I do this and that, and I realize that there's only one commodity that matters right now, and that's time. There's no time for fucking around anymore.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to waste your time with people that kind of haven't gotten to a point in their lives where they understand what being alive is all about. And you realize that right now you're you, me, we're at the it's not we only get better. And then we have a stroke or a heart attack or some goddamn thing. But that's just the way that life is. But until that point, our ability to analyze and draw and do all these things and what we think of, and we don't want to wait too long before we do that masterpiece. yeah,
definitely.
That's the only thing, man. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot.
Totally understand what you're talking about. Yeah, time.
And I feel I was Robert Abel was just so. I was only there. Clark was there. David Keller, John was there. Pauline, Charlie Gibson,
Lisa
Larry
O'Brien,
Weinberg. All these. Yeah. All these people that we know, and John. I think John saw the mistakes that Robert Abel made. I mean, that was a real. Robert Abel just had a different way of doing business. He was always paying for the last job with the next job.
Oh.
But again, he was one of those guys who could, as they say, he could sell ice to Eskimos. He could walk into a meeting and tell people one thing and deliver something else. And go, this is just going to be better. This is just going to be better. Oh, no, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then they would just eat it up. And then he'd come back and he'd tell somebody like Clark and Randy, he goes, I don't know how the hell we're going to do this. You guys figure it out. So,
awesome.
So that, the world is full of guys like this. Yeah. And so, but we did get in over our head on Star Trek. And so the company had to slow down. And then I came back in 84 and did some stuff with Randy. And that was, those were wonderful. did some really nice stuff, and then 80, I don't know, and then the years just all blend together, kind of. And then, because when I left Deke, I kind of putted around, and when I left Deke, that's when I went to Rhythm and Hughes. And when I went to Rhythm and Hughes, I was the 27th employee. And Cliff Boulay, who had been the art director, he was just ready to leave. He left. And there was about a 2-month period there where I was kind of the art department.
Yeah.
And then I brought Richie. Richie did some work for us, and Steve did some work for us, Steve Olds. And we were, at that point, we were still competing with Pixar, and I forget what the one up in the other one, not Dream Quest, but and CG was just kind of this little bitty baby, and nobody gave it any respect. We did Night of the Intruder, where we did some. It was a Vietnam movie. We did some bombs and some missiles and a couple things, and we were still doing logos for TV, and we were starting to combine. But then in what was it, 91? That's when we did the Jetsons. And see, that's this is one of those things where I just wish, God, I would love to do that Jetsons today. Yeah, I did about 500,000 designs for it, but it was just the capacity of the technology and for rendering and what the amount of information the system could carry. All of that was limited. And so, but it's like more fun than a barrel of monkeys. I got no complaints. And so that's kind of where, I guess that's why I feel the way I do now, is that, every day you open your eyes is a good day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still, like I said, the long-term revelation that I've had is that I just never had an idea that to do what we do, to be a creative person, that's one thing, because you're solving problems, you're trying to figure things out and whatever. But I just never figured there were so many people that were like me, doing the same thing, and that we're all in this long ride. We're like a bunch of pioneers on a wagon or something.